Good afternoon, and we're going to be kicking off a little training session. And just let me start by saying if I'm delighted to be partnering with the labor movement on fighting COVID-19. And one of the things that we did in my office in partnership with the county's public health department was we created a program called the Community Ambassador Program. And the idea here is to educate leaders in our community who have influence over others all about COVID-19. And that way you can answer questions and feel confident answering questions. And so what today's agenda is, we're gonna hear from Dave and Jean to get us kicked off. And then we're gonna hear from Dr. Cody, Dr. Fensterscheib, and then Dr. Smith is gonna walk us through COVID 101. Now we're recording this so that you all can put it on your websites and use it as you see fit to educate your members if you think it will be helpful to getting people vaccinated. And so let me turn it over to Jean and then to Dave to make some opening remarks, and then we'll get started.
Thank you so much, Supervisor Chavez, and thank you to the county for being excellent partners always, but especially as we've moved through the COVID crisis. Union members are especially responsive to their unions when they're given information. And so what we really want to do is make sure that the credible spokespeople that represent working people have the most accurate information to make sure that folks get vaccinated. So that's our goal for today. And thank you so much for your help in accomplishing that work.
Thank you. Dave?
Yes. Thank you. I very much appreciate your work, Supervisor Chavez, and the work of the county to bring this meeting together. So often, union leadership is looked to provide the answers to many of the things that are happening on the job site, and I believe COVID-19 should be no different. So I also appreciate the folks who've shown up here today to make sure that they can represent their members and keep them safe. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. We appreciate all of you. And I will say that most people don't know this, but the most, the most democratic organizations in the country are unions. And what that means is that people come out of the woodwork when they need help from their unions. And right now it's no different. We have a really great group of people here today with us. I'm really excited to introduce them. And it's a particularly exciting day because we've just in Santa Clara County, under the leadership of Doctors Cody and Smith and Fensterscheib, and we have a whole bunch of doctors here, that we vaccinated over 1 million people. Like we've given 1 million shots to people who live in this county. And by the way, that doesn't count people we vaccinated, your members who may be driving in from other places. So if you live or work in Santa Clara County, you have access to getting vaccinated here. So over 1 million. And I want you to know that the backbone of that was done with union labor. Right? These are our brothers and sisters who are on the front line. So really excited to, just to acknowledge that. And we also have Doctors Kelly Ye and I saw Dr. Maria Rosales and Dr. Solario Cortez who are with us, who are going to answer any smarty questions that you have after these other doctors give presentations. So with that, I'm really excited to get to introduce a friend and just sort of a fearless champion for equity and for health in our community, Dr. Sarah Cody.
Thank you, Supervisor Chavez, and welcome everyone. It is wonderful to be with you. We are celebrating today. 1 million people living in Santa Clara County have received at least one COVID-19 vaccine shot, which is really phenomenal, particularly since the vaccine didn't even arrive in our county until late December, and it's only April. So we're really, really excited about that. I'm not going to take too much time. Mostly, I just want to express my gratitude, both to Supervisor Chavez and members of the board, to our community leaders, and of course, to all my county family members. This has been an ultra marathon. We've all needed to kind of hold each other up and keep each other going. But nothing really can happen without leadership at the grassroots level in the community to spread the word and to answer questions and to make to ensure that everybody knows what's going on and what resources are available, and particularly now about how to get vaccinated. So I think I'll turn things over to Dr. Marty Fensterscheib, who I want to note is my mentor, who brought me to the County of Santa Clara in 1998. Dr. Fensterscheib.
I guess that makes me old, but
no.
I did I did attempt to retire, and I've obviously failed at that, but I'm just joking. I'm very honored to have been invited back to help in this monumental effort in getting COVID under control, and now with testing and then vaccines. And so, yes, we had a press conference just now. We're announcing the 1 millionth first dose appointments and vaccinations that have been given. And so we're really ecstatic. That means 60% of our community that's eligible, so that's 16 years of age and older, have been vaccinated with at least one shot. So that's really good, 60%. And you know, that's great, but we still have a ways to go. And so that's why we need your help. We have that, you know, that remaining 40% is going to be harder, as I say, than the first 60%, because we're going to be up against a lot of misinformation, hesitancy, and then some access issues also, and barriers for people actually getting the vaccine. But really important for people in the community to value their trusted leadership, friends, union representation, family, to really give them the word and encourage them to be vaccinated, that it's safe and very, very effective. So again, our data looks good, but I would remind you also that underneath the good data lies the issues around the disproportionate number of people who actually have not been vaccinated from our communities of color, especially our Latinx community, again, who is about 40% vaccinated, so well under what we're looking at now for the entire community. So lots of work to be done, but I think if it's any measurement of how far we've come, I think we'll get to the finish line. And so we're so happy that you're here to get this training from Dr. Smith and others, and good luck to you all. And we're here to answer any of your questions later on. Thank you again, and have a great, great conference.
Thanks all. And just to say a couple things. So you're going to get a lot of information, and we're going to put some of it in the chat as we're going through discussing this, so you can feel free to access it while we're talking. If you have any questions, you can raise your hands or put it in the chat. And what we'll do is Dr. Smith is going to do a very high level kind of COVID 101, COVID testing 101, and then really focusing on vaccines. And we're going to make sure that you have all the information your members need to find out how and where to be vaccinated. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Smith. Oh, and one other thing, if I could ask my team, could you put the Facebook page where people could get information on an ongoing basis? And any of you who signed up for today, we'll keep getting you information. You'll start to receive it from us. But also we're going to be a reference for you. So if you have questions or your members have questions, you can just reach out to us. All right. So Dr. Smith, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Supervisor. Can you all see the slides here?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll be doing basically a high-level introduction, and we'll start very basic. You know, there's a question of what's a virus. Well, a virus is actually the smallest living organism. Oftentimes, there are different sizes of viruses, but they are the infection that takes over our body by basically injecting DNA or RNA into our cells. So they take over the function of the cell and they replicate inside the cell. And the virus that causes COVID is called a coronavirus, and it's very similar to the virus that causes the common cold. But obviously it has a much different effect than the common cold. So here's a picture of that coronavirus. It's called a coronavirus because of these little red pockets. They're not actually red in reality, but There are stems that make it look like a crown. And it does cause many illnesses and has caused many illnesses for a long time in humans, most commonly the cold. But it has also caused SARS and MERS over the last recent history. It's a virus that now is causing COVID and is very dangerous. In terms of testing, the way that we test for COVID is there's two types of tests, basically. One is called the PCR test. And what it does is it looks for the genetic material of the virus in your body. And it uses a mechanism called polymerase chain reaction, which multiplies the DNA and RNA that's found in the sample. Samples comes from your nose or from saliva. And the results can take a few days or a few minutes, depending on the equipment that's available where the sample is collected. But the PCR test is the gold standard. It's very accurate. It, like I said, measures the genetic material in your body that identifies the coronavirus. Another test that's sometimes done is called the Anagen Test. This is not as accurate as the PCR test because it actually looks at the proteins that the virus creates. And it is still a sample that comes from your nose or your saliva. But when it tests negative, it sometimes is actually positive. So it has to be confirmed with a PCR test. This kind of test is usually used in an area where there's frequent exposure that could cause COVID. So you might find it as a test that's done every day or every other day at a work site or at a particular location where you have a high risk. And that way it's a screening test. Now, in order to fight the likelihood of infection, vaccines are created, and vaccines are artificial components of the virus that are injected into your body that cause an immune reaction. Two of the vaccines that are used for COVID are what's called mRNA vaccines. They're sort of a new technology. What happens there is they inject the messenger RNA into your body, and your own cells use this messenger RNA to develop the proteins that mimic the virus, the coronavirus, and then your body develops an immune response to those proteins. The standard older style vaccine mechanism is actually taking the virus itself, breaking it down, denaturing it, and taking the proteins that are left over, injecting the proteins themselves into your body, causing the immune reaction. The reason why mRNA is a nice virus technology is because it doesn't actually use the virus itself, so there's no risk of infection, and also because it's easier technically to develop in the lab. Anyhow, either way you do it, it's the same idea. You create antibodies to the virus proteins, and that's what protects your body. Now, this is how vaccine approvals work in our country. The federal government develops, in conjunction with drug companies, a particular vaccine, and then goes through an approval process. Once the approval process is complete, the vaccine can be used in the public in the United States. The county does not develop, test, approve, or manufacture vaccines. all we do is deliver them to arms. The way that vaccines are tested is that once it is developed and tested in a large group of individuals of various ages and races, it goes through an approval process, and there are steps. Right now, the step that we're at with the 3 virus or vaccines that are available is the emergency use authorization, are called EUA. An EUA allows providers to utilize the vaccine in an emergency situation. However, it's important to notice that all of the vaccines have gone through all of the same processes of approval that previous vaccines have gone through. They've just gone through them more quickly. And so an EUA means that the vaccine is approved for use in adults, and that it's safe, and that it's effective, and that it can be used urgently, but there's still processes and testing going on before it actually gets its final approval. Again, this goes through how the process works with vaccine trials that are done by the pharmaceutical companies under the supervision of the federal government, and various agencies in the federal government and community committees will work on the approval. There are 3 vaccines currently available. One is Pfizer, another Moderna. Those are the Rna mRNA vaccines. They both require 2 doses. Pfizer separated by 21 days, Moderna separated by 28 days. You can think of it as a booster. Both doses are exactly the same chemicals, but you get a much stronger immune response with 2 doses. So that's why they tested it with 2 doses, and it's approved for 2 doses. You've heard probably in the news some talk about possibly using only 1 dose, but that's not approved yet. Johnson & Johnson, or Jensen, is the other vaccine that has been approved with an emergency use authorization. However, it has been on pause, and today the federal government is reviewing that pause. There was some question about an increased incidence of clotting caused by Janssen. We'll see what the federal government decides to do today about the pause. Likely, if they haven't already done it, I haven't been keeping totally up to date, but it's likely they will release its use again with some more restrictions. All 3 vaccines are very effective, very safe. This is a summary of what we know about the vaccines. I won't read through it in detail, but you've heard when you look at this line that says effectiveness, that Moderna and Pfizer are both considered to be 94-95% effective, whereas Janssen was reported as 74% effective. These numbers are a little bit misleading in the sense that most vaccines that you're familiar with, flu vaccine and others, are less than 70% effective. And so all of these 3 vaccines are very effective. Certainly, the Moderna and Pfizer ended up with effective numbers that are extremely rare and very good, but Johnson & Johnson is still very effective, and any of them are better than nothing. So as I mentioned, vaccines help your immune system to recognize the infectious disease and therefore prevent you from getting the disease itself. There are other vaccines for COVID that are under investigation at this point. They have not been approved, but they use all kinds of different technologies. So we can expect a rush of new vaccines coming soon. Once you have a vaccine, whether it's the 2-dose or the 1-dose, it takes a few weeks for your body to develop the immune response. But 2 weeks after your last dose, so that is 2 weeks after either the Janssen 1-dose or 2 weeks after the second dose of either Moderna or Pfizer, you're considered protected. Now, the infection itself is changing, the virus is changing, so there still is debate about whether resistance will develop. But at this point, all 3 vaccines look to protect from the virus, the infection completely. So again, there's great effectiveness of all 3 vaccines. They prevent severe disease and hospitalization and death, even in people who sometimes can be at risk of developing a mild case of the infection because of variants. So your likelihood of death or hospitalization is very low. There also is high likelihood that it prevents transmission of the disease to other people and therefore protects your family, yourself, keeps your community safe. So once you receive a vaccine, you might have some mild symptoms: soreness, redness in your arm, mild headache, sometimes a mild fever. Usually these kinds of symptoms happen after the second dose of Moderna or Pfizer, but they're only present for a couple of days and very minor. We talked about how effective they are. Typically, when you get scheduled for your first vaccination, you'll be scheduled for a second follow-up in 21 to 28 days. During the time that you're waiting for your second vaccine and after your second vaccine, you should always still wear face coverings and continue to practice social distancing when you're in a group of individuals, because there's still risk of infection. There are some changing recommendations coming from the CDC about what fully vaccinated people can do with other fully vaccinated people, but I won't go into that right now. Suffice it to say that the vaccine is extremely important and protects you, but doesn't prevent you from needing to be wary of potential infection. So you can read more about vaccines on the California State website, which you see here. Right now, everyone over 16 is eligible for vaccination. So everyone who you know who's over 16 should be encouraged to get vaccinated. And as Supervisor mentioned, in our county, anyone who works or lives in the county is eligible. Going to our page, our webpage, it's sccfreevax.org. You can see a picture of what that page looks like. Down here, you can either book an appointment, you can find out all the information you'd ever want to know about vaccine. You can get updates from the public health department that we put out on a regular basis. And you can look at the data that we have about who's been vaccinated what areas have been vaccinated, how many vaccines have gone out. And as was mentioned today, we reached the 1 million mark for first doses. And we're currently at about 38 to 40% of individuals in the community over 16 who have been completed, meaning they got their first and second dose. So we're making lots of progress. You can follow that on the webpage. We also have the webpage in multiple languages, which you have here. Or if you're needing information or wanting to make an appointment, you can call the, either 211 or the call line 970-2000. Remember that there are other providers in the county that are using vaccine. We have links to all of their numbers at sccfreevax.org, or you can call them directly, and I've got your numbers are there. So with that, I suppose we'll turn to questions, and I will unshare.
Thanks, Dr. Smith. And I know that's a lot of information, and you're going to get these slides. And so I don't want you to feel like you just, you went to class and we're just going to do a quiz or anything. But I think that the information we most wanted you to have is just to know that the vaccines are safe. And if you get questions, you'll know exactly where to go to get those questions answered. The other thing that we put in the chat and that you'll get sent out to you, and let me just say this real quickly, is that every week we do new information, and we will do commercials and other things, and we'll send those out to you, or we'll post them on the website. So if you want to push those out to your members, that you can. And the other is that if you're curious about how to help your members get signed up for an appointment, it's really easy to go on to the website and look around for the date and the time that you're interested in and the location, so you can help your members sign up directly. Are there any questions, you guys? Because they're really, we were happy to answer any of them. Juan?
Yes, thank you for all this information. One of my questions is, if you've been vaccinated, are you still, I don't know if you guys, the county supervisors, put the regulations at the airport, but if you've been vaccinated already, are you still going to be required to take the COVID test if you were to go out and travel? And I'm just saying whether you travel here just within, the United States or internationally.
Yeah, that's a great question. Jeff, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, first of all, the Board of Supervisors and the public health officer in the county do not have travel restrictions that are specific to our county. There are some states that require you to have tests before you can enter their borders. Particularly, we know a lot about Hawaii requires a test before you get on the plane and also a test after you get off the plane. And they're at this point not making any distinctions about whether you've been vaccinated or not, although there's a lot of talk about a potential vaccine passport, but that's not been implemented yet.
And one other thing I'll just add, and I don't know if any of the other doctors want to weigh in on this, but one thing I'll just add to that is that you'll start to see more and more, like, I don't know if any of you tried to go to a Giants game or an A's game, everybody's going to start having their own, I'm a little nervous about their own rules, because they don't want to be sued, and they want people to be safe, and they want people who come in to be safe. So what I'm hoping is that as we learn more about the science and really understand how long people are vaccinated, and want to answer another part of the question you're asking is, like, even if you've been vaccinated, can you still be a risk? All of that I think is going to continue to sort of unfold in the short term. So with that, I'll go to Will. Will, you're on mute.
Thank you, Supervisor Chavez. I appreciate the opportunity. I know, my friends, people of color, even people, that are not of color, a big concern is the long-term well-being. There's no long-term testing. And the naysayers who are anti-vaccine will turn around and say, well, see, look at what happened with Johnson and Johnson. You see the blood clotting, these women that passed away, lost their life because they took this vaccine. How do you counter-react that pushback? When somebody brings that point forward, the reality is there is no long-term testing. I know people, I have friends of mine that they're willing to take the vaccine, but they rather wait. I'd rather wait a year or so, make sure this is safe before I put this in my body.
Mhm.
So, you know, what is it that I would tell somebody that's coming from that point of view?
That's an excellent question. And I'm gonna pivot that to any of the doctors. So which doctor wants to weigh in on that?
I don't know if Dr. Fensterscheib or Dr. Cody are still on.
They're
I-
not. We
I
have
can-
Dr. Ye and Dr. Did I say your last name properly? Okay, great. We have Dr. Ye and Dr. Saladio Cortez on, but I'm interested in the best pitch you have.
Do you want me to go first? Oh, go ahead. Go
Okay,
ahead.
guys, this is Dr. Solorio, and thank you, Will, for it's an excellent question that I get daily, weekly with my patients. I'm a primary care doctor here at Gilroy, and I step back and I go back in our history as human beings, disease, looking at polio, for example, even HPV. And with PAP, with cervical cancer, and just going back on those diseases and kind of demonstrating what those diseases did to the human disease, and the hernia people, and people dying of those conditions. And then I bring up, well, at that time, I think it was very normal, as it is now, for people to have some hesitancy. So I base my reasoning, or the way that I speak, on the science, and stepping back to, if you were back in the 50s, 60s with, polio affecting so many people, and then this new vaccine coming, and knowing that protected a lot of people. And now, scientists can look at that polio vaccine 30, 40 years from now and say, well, there's no significant, medical conditions, like, for example, cancers that came out of the polio vaccine. So I kind of use that reasoning to say, you're right. It's the honest truth. We don't have the long-term data, but I do have the science to back it up, that with new therapies, new medications, new vaccines, there's always going to be the science behind it to look at that data. I think personally, and I think scientists have also said, with the Johnson & Johnson pause, it's actually good. It goes to show you that the federal government, the state, is actually looking out for people. That when there are steps in place to look at these adverse events, that it's not just ignored. That we actually do look at it and say, well, is this phenomena real? Are the vaccines really causing these blood clots in the brain, or was it just by coincidence and such? So, I mean, actually, it's a long, winded answer that I've given you, but I think, going back 3 months with vaccinating my patients and knowing those that are more hesitant, it takes time, and that kind of reasoning to reassure patients, and honesty also. I think that's what I use to get the point across.
Dr. Ye, did you want to add?
I wanted to second that, but I'm an anesthesiologist working at Valley Medical Center and also at St. Louis Regional. And in our culture, there's also a lot of hesitancy. And so I've been fielding these questions with even my own family members. And what I tell them is twofold. One, that just because these vaccines seem like they came really quickly doesn't mean that this technology is new. We have to remember that the mRNA and also the vectors that it's using for J&J, all of this has been used for other pharmaceuticals, and especially like in the cancer treatments, right? And so one, it's not new. So it's not like it's never been used in humans before. And so just because it's new for a vaccine for the mRNA, that we've seen the efficacy just in these clinical trials with thousands and thousands of people. And two, if they could just step one day into my shoes and see what we've seen with COVID in the hospitals, what's the alternative? We have, you know, these patients that were previously pretty healthy and they come in and then the next day they're gone, just how sudden it can be. Versus, yes, these vaccines are just coming out, but the trials are out there. And like Dr. Smith said, just because it took a couple of months as opposed to years and years, it's because a labor force was put in there and we put our energy into trying to solve this crisis. And so just because it's quick doesn't mean it was rushed, doesn't mean that shortcuts were taken. Because like Dr. Smith said, all of the checkpoints had to be reached in order to get this out into our arms. And so, you know, if they could see what we saw versus getting the shot and taking that chance, like we were all just so eager, you know, when they came out to get it quickly. So those are the two things I tell them.
The other thing, Will, I'll just say this and then I'll go to Sal, that I'm really excited about, since we hit 1 million people, you know, in our county, it's also 1 million people went before you. And that's what I actually have been telling folks this weekend, because, you know, like 1 million people and we're good, right? So, and I'm hoping that the more people understand how many people have gotten vaccinated, that it'll make people feel more comfortable. But it's a great question. Sal? I think you might be on mute.
It doesn't show mute on there, but I have a satellite device. Is that better?
Yep, perfectly.
So I just wanted to make a comment quickly, and then I have a question. So first of all, I just, you know, want to say how proud I am with the leadership of the county, with, you know, from Dr. Cody and all the abuse she and staff endured at the very beginning of the crisis. And then, you know, other leadership like Dr. Smith, who dealt capably with the state, with the governor and Blue Cross or Blue Shield. And I mean, the leadership that the county's exhibited has been exemplary and has made me very proud to be part of this county. I'm a lifelong resident. And so anyway, I want to get that out because you all deserve a lot of gratitude from us who live and work here. So thank you. The question is, I have a particular thing that I deal with, and it's vestibular issues. I belong to a support group called Vestibular Disorders Association, and there's a separate support group that deals just with COVID-19. And a lot of people, I mean, hundreds, thousands of people who take the vaccine have vestibular reactions to it. And then there's other people who've never had vestibular issues who have reactions to the vaccine. And the comment that I make online is that, yeah, I get vertigo, or I get dizzy, or I get cold chills, and I get these things. They might last a few days, they might last 7 days. For some people, they get vertigo for 30 days. That's not uncommon if you have a vestibular issue. But like Dr. Ye was saying, the alternative is to not take the vaccine and get COVID, and that's much worse. But my question is that for many of the people, dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds of people who on the two-dose vaccine, they're only going to take the 1 dose because of the side effects. What do you say to people about that, who only want to take the 1 dose rather than the 2nd dose of the Moderna or the Pfizer? I had the Johnson, so I had the 1 dose, which I had a 1 week reaction, but I'm fine now. But what about those people who just want to do the 1 dose of a 2-dose vaccine?
It's a great question. Doctor, I don't know which, I've got a lot of, now I see Dr. Rosales too. Which doctor wants to respond?
You have too many doctors. No.
You can't have too many.
I can take this.
That'd be great.
Is Dr. Rosales. I'm a kidney doctor, and well, right now I'm not going to say anything yet regarding the 1 dose because it's on pause. But when it's not on pause anymore, I think it's still a good idea to get that 1 dose of the vaccine. The reason is, even though it is said to be less efficacious, it's still very efficacious. 70% is pretty good, and almost no hospitalizations with that, and no mortality, so, or low, very low mortality if ever. So I think it's still a good idea to get the one shot if you're hesitant about the side effects.
If you don't, but for people who are, for example, who got the Pfizer vaccine and you had a bad reaction to the first shot, what's the thing you would tell a patient who came and said, I had a terrible reaction, I am not taking that second shot? So what would it be?
I'll take that, Supervisor.
Okay.
So let me step back, because also just to add with the question about what if you do just do Moderna and Pfizer. So the studies say that you're at 70% effectiveness after the first vaccine, either Moderna or Pfizer. After you get your second vaccine of either both of them, you'll be at 95%. So the answer is, if you stay with only one vaccine, you'll be at 70%. Now, as you mentioned, in terms of, like, let's say we have a patient who has a severe allergy to Moderna or Pfizer, what is the option? There is an option, and that was before the pause, but you could do the Johnson & Johnson vaccine 28 days later. That's a CDC recommendation. So, and then if you have we've had a few patients at the vaccination site in Gilroy who maybe did not have an allergy, but maybe had a just severe, dizziness. Dr. Solorio, I don't want to do this again. And me as a doc would be, well, okay, so what do we do now? Is there another option? And that option is yes, that Johnson & Johnson, you could do it 28 days later.
Oh, really? And so, so you can, that's the first time I've heard this. You can mix vaccines.
No. So let me step back. It's not a mix. Yeah, it's not a mix. And we're not going to do it, like, again, it's not going to be like I'm mentioning more the extreme cases. For sure, severe allergy, which means anaphylaxis, which means shortness of breath or rash right after the shot, then and there, or within 4 hours.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
We have to document that for sure that patient's never going to get Moderna or Pfizer, and we could do Johnson & Johnson.
Got it.
That's not really mixing. It's just you get an allergy to the first one. What I'm saying is that for also certain individuals who say, you know what, I'm like too many side effects. I don't want to deal with Moderna, Pfizer again. Is there a possibility that I could, stop this series, Moderna and Pfizer, and go with another series? That other series would be the Johnson & Johnson, and the earliest we'll be able to give it is 28 days later.
Got it. Does that make sense, Sal?
It kind of does. So someone who's taken the one dose and doesn't want to take it again, even though there's what is a 70-something% efficacy for that one dose, it's not going to go to the 95 or the 90%. They're not going to do it again, but they do have an option of 28 days later doing a Johnson. Was that what you were saying?
No.
Oh,
So Johnson & Johnson will always be one vaccine, here on out. It's the boosters that we don't know yet. So the science is still, CDC is still looking at, are we going to need boosters for Moderna, Pfizer, or Johnson & Johnson? That answer is not there yet. So Johnson & Johnson, if you only get the Johnson & Johnson, and 2 weeks later you were to come to me and ask me how much protected am I per the studies, then I would say, 70%. But then this is the caveat, as Dr. Smith mentioned in the presentations. The way I respond to that question is like, well, yeah, I'm going to give you this number, but you can't really compare oranges and apples. The studies that were done with Johnson & Johnson, the timeline, the variance was very different from Moderna and Pfizer. So that's what we're saying when we make the message that all three are effective similarly, and that the answer is yes. All three kept people away from the hospital and death.
Right, but Dr. Saladio, here's a specific question. When you have people who have had a bad reaction to the first dose of Pfizer or the first dose of Moderna, and they don't want to come back for the second dose of Pfizer or the second dose of Moderna, what you're saying is, okay, you're 70% covered, period. And what Sal is saying is, is there any specific advice or strategies to get people to take the second dose? And and what I hear you all saying is essentially you're only going to be 70% covered with the first dose of Moderna or Pfizer. So even though they had an uncomfortable reaction, they should still take the second dose. Sal, the one thing I'll add to that, because people who have, I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep the light on here. People who have severe medical reactions or people who have really complicated medical histories, the one thing that I would also recommend is that they speak to their doctor, their doctor, because their doctor knows their health situation in much more detail and could give them advice about that.
Yeah, that hasn't worked very well, to be honest. But
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'll just say that I lobbied to get the Johnson just based on the forum that I was part of, because other people's who had asked their doctors, there just wasn't enough information for them. They didn't have the background, the education, the whatever else that they needed, you know. And I'm sorry, Dr. Ye, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that I agree with Supervisor Chavez that I've had the question asked of me because one of my neighbors actually had a terrible reaction to the Pfizer, where her arm ballooned up like the Michelin Man, and she had called her doctor and wanted to see about what she should do. And she's a photographer. And so it was on her non-dominant arm. The physician had suggested maybe doing it on the other side to just, wait for this one to swell down. But she didn't want to because she didn't want the other arm to be the same. And so when I talked to her through, we talked about adverse effects versus anaphylaxis versus the alternative, which is, and then also looked at numbers like, well, you're about 70 something percent. You're not going to reach the 90 something percent, but I still think you should get it done. And she actually went yesterday and we talked about ways to kind of mitigate the side effects too. And so like the hydration, the rest, the electrolytes, things that might help ease some of the symptoms that they may get. And so she got it yesterday and she texted me last night and said that she's glad she did it on the same arm because she didn't want, if it was going to be puffy, she didn't need the other side to be puffy too.
You want a matching puffs. Yeah.
Yeah. But just asking them why,
Yeah.
So.
And one thing I will say too to all of you is that if Johnson & Johnson, which I suspect it will be unpaused, one of the recommendations that I made to our staff is that we notify people where they can get Johnson & Johnson, because I do think the way we were handling the vaccines early on, because we didn't have that many of them, is just wherever you went, we were giving you the vaccine that we had available at that location. And the complication, and I can't emphasize this enough, of giving millions of, ultimately it's going to be millions of shots, right, that we're going to be giving in this county, and being able to get people to their first shot and then making sure they get the right second shot, that we weren't able to be really like discreet. But what I'm going to be recommending is that we highlight, here are the places you can go to get Johnson & Johnson, because a whole bunch of people would rather have one shot, no matter what the risk is, than they would two shots. And so I think that's really where we're going to be getting to over the next couple of weeks. So I think those are really good questions. And I think, and it's so individualized in some respects too. So thank you for that. Thanks for helping me understand that too. Are there other questions?
Thank
We have these
all.
really smart doctors and we can just ask away, you guys. Yes, Mundo.
I hear that we need 75 to 80% vaccinated for herd immunity. The question is, what would it look like if we're unable to achieve that? Will our vaccines simply be less effective, or will we need newly developed vaccines year after year?
What a great question. Okay, doctors. Okay, Dr. Ye.
So right now, as you know, we're in what we call a pandemic, right? So the whole world is involved. But if we can't get to herd immunity, then we are going to be in a situation where we call it an endemic, where we are going to have to live with this for, I don't know, like for as long as we foresee. Then the question about getting the boosters would be correct. That every year we would have to see what the dominant variant is, and then tailor our vaccines to that variant so that we would all be offered these vaccines year after year.
And that's a really great question. I just will add one other thing for all of you. Like, one of the reasons we really want you to be educated about this is that you're going to get a lot of questions from your members too, because there may be, like right now, these are the stage we are in the authorization. So these are authorized, but they're not FDA approved yet, or I can't remember what the next approval stage is. So we can't force people to be vaccinated for particular jobs, but this is going to be a job site issue, which is why I really wanted to make sure we're doing some education with you and able to come back and talk to you more about the implications for our workforce. And you know, and I can talk more. And let me just say this. So we're vaccinating to 16. The next group that's going to come up for vaccination will be 12 to 16-year-olds, that age group. And then it's going to be the littles. So we're not even, so to answer your question, like how we're going to get to that 85%, we're going in that direction right now, because we even have more people to vaccinate worldwide. But in our community, that's another 100,000 children between, I think it's another 125,000 children that are younger than 16. I have to look at those numbers again. But Mundo, did you want to follow up?
I do. Actually, on what you just mentioned, is there a one-shot vaccine that they're working on for the younger age group, or is it just the Pfizer and Moderna?
Which doctor knows that? Again, I'm looking at all my doctors here. Anybody know this one? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So, all of the companies, so J&J, Moderna, and Pfizer are all looking at the younger age groups. Pfizer seems to have taken the lead, and they already have preliminary data for the 12 to 15 age group. And as we speak, they're already starting to look at what we call stepwise dosing for those who are less than 12. Moderna is starting to look also, they're collecting data now for the 12 to 15, or actually up to 18, so like the teenage group. But J&J has its own things going on right now, but they are also looking for the younger kids as well. So as Dr. Smith also said, there are a couple of other companies out there that the results are looking pretty good, but they don't want to jump out there because we already have 3 big ones now. But I suspect that by the fall, the Pfizer 12 to 15 will get EUA. And we're hopeful that the younger age group, the littles, as Supervisor Chavez had mentioned, will be towards the tail end of 2021 and early 2022. I'm desperately looking because I have a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old. So following the data super closely.
And we're going to be happy to work with the labor movement to do some check-ins with all of you, as we learn more. So we should just schedule this, at least once a month and just update people as we learn more. Thank you for the question. Will?
Thank you, Supervisor Chavez. Try to make sure this is probably my last question in respect for everyone's time. There's people that are very, very healthy that typically don't normally get sick. Myself, for instance, I don't usually get sick too often. So I choose not to take the normal flu shot. I know people that they choose not to take the normal flu shot. They'll get their antibodies if they happen to get the flu. With the talk of a possible booster shot on a yearly basis, it makes this thing sound almost like it's the normal flu. And I know it's not the normal flu. I know it's much more contagious and lethal. But the reality is there's so many people that had COVID-19 and survived it. So I've already had people say, man, this thing isn't effective. You're going to need a booster shot every year. Man, it's like the normal flu shot. And I don't take it either. I don't take it myself on a normal basis. So I'm not sure what I would tell those members, those individuals.
Yeah, so that is true that a lot of people thankfully recover from it, but there are so many people as well who don't, and they were perfectly healthy to begin with, and you don't know who's going to get it. And we do see a lot of them. We've seen a lot of them in the hospital. So it's you really can't compare it to the flu at this point, because it's really much more deadly than the flu.
Let me add one thing, Will, that this is because I've had that same question come my way too. You know, three things that I would say. One is we are still learning what the long-term impacts of COVID-19 are. And two, and this is really critical because this attacks your the villi in your lungs, that the damage that happens to your lungs every year, frankly, as we get older, I didn't know this. Like I had this doctor explain this to me, it totally depressed the crap out of me because I always feel like, oh, I'm like you, Will, like I took a flu shot this year. And let me just make one other point. Because so many people took the flu shot this year, we had less people in the hospital with flu and less people died. And that's a reminder to get your damn shot, Will. So anyway, there's that. But the other is that the long-term impacts to the human body, we don't yet know. And so some people are living with it in a much longer time frame. We don't know. For some people, for whatever reason, it damages much more of the villi in the lungs. And just as a reminder, that's how you get oxygen into your body and helps you fight every other thing that happens bad to you. So I think part of what we need to do is keep it, really keep it real with people. Like we don't want to hustle people. We want to tell people what we know, give them the best information we can, help them make the best decision they can for themselves. That said, I think both the point that you and Mundo just raised is that the more people who get vaccinated, the less risk there is for everybody on the other end. Because the thing that Dr. Ye raised is that we don't want to be in the annual give a shot, because here's the thing we know about the flu. Every year, we have all these scientists race to figure out what kind of flu shot we're going to get. A whole bunch of people get that shot. It may or may not be the flu that comes, and we still have people who die. And it would just be, better for everybody if we had less death. And, so anyway, but I appreciate the question.
Just from my understanding, I think you referred to villi that gets trapped into the lungs.
Well, these are the little, they're the little
Alveoli.
Yeah, thank you.
Alveoli.
Alveoli that are in your lungs that suck up air. So maybe a doctor could explain what I went to. I got briefed and I clearly didn't learn my science.
I think one of the things.
What I'm getting from that is because I know people that have suffered from COVID. They didn't die. I actually know some people that died as well, but the people I'm talking about, they didn't pass from COVID, but they did suffer from COVID fatigue, where, several weeks after they contracted COVID, they're going up a flight of stairs, and the next thing you know, they get to the top of the stairs and they're sitting there winded, like, what the heck is going on here?
Exactly.
So I'm assuming that is what leads to that COVID fatigue.
Yes, let me get a real doctor.
No.
Yeah.
I'm weighing in with my little lung. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's that it could, it affects the actual anatomy of the lungs, the structure, the villi, the cells in there, and there's also patients that have normal looking X-rays, normal looking anatomy, and they're still suffering from headaches. They're still, and that's the sequela that we're talking about, the post effects of COVID. That fine, you did well at 15 days and you got better. You did not end up in the ICU. You didn't end up in the hospital. But guess what? You're today in my clinic talking about shortness of breath that I can't figure it out. I've done everything. I've done an ultrasound of your heart. I've done a stress test of your heart. I mean, I know I'm getting like technical in my terms, but it's all this stuff I've done for you, and yet you still can't, or you go to work, or you can't do your 2-mile run. And I think that's the stuff that we're talking about with this. That's my response to the patient that says, I'm a healthy individual. Like, yeah, but with this COVID-19, I mean, what's happening is that the destruction of ICU, rooms getting packed, the deaths, the funeral homes, and the aftermath months later. And it's like, it's that realness that, I want that patient to hear, to make that decision and say, well, this time around, I probably should get vaccinated. And then let me just add, as a primary care doctor, it's been actually this week, it's been very interesting how on my charts, I've seen so many people that never got their flu shot, never got their pneumonia shot, but then you see their chart with the COVID-19 vaccine. And it goes to show that there's that worry that you don't know if it's, going to happen to you, that you even though you're healthy, that it's going to take you. So
And Dr. Saladio, I wanted to just do a time check. I apologize, I'm chairing a meeting, but I'm gonna leave my team here. And let me just say to all of you guys, you're all gonna, I wanna let you answer as many questions as the doctors have time for. Number one, I wanna thank you all, number two. And number three, you're all gonna get email from us. So sign up to be ambassadors so you keep getting that email from us. And also sign up to that website. I'm sorry, our Facebook page, because it's got, sometimes it has really funny little videos and sometimes they're very serious, but you can use those to educate your members. People in our communities trust you all deeply and we need your help, right? We're just getting to the end and we really need your help. But my staff will stay with you, and I'm gonna ask that if the doctors can stay and answer a few more questions would be great. All right, good to see all of you.
Thank you.
Well, I see that your hand's still up. I don't know if you had a follow-up question to that. You're good? Okay. And then I see no other hands up. Anyone else that may have a question? Or you can type it to the, yes, please go ahead.
In regard to the long haulers, we kind of talked a little bit about people that don't actually die but are sick longer term. Do we know what kind of percentage of people who have had COVID are long haulers? I know we know how many have died, I don't know what it is, like 0.5% or maybe less, but long haulers, what kind of numbers are suffering long term yet not dying?
I don't know the percentage, no, I don't know the actual percentage. And then another thing I would say is, some people may not report, and so there also could be a under-reporting percentage. So, but the actual number, I do not know. All I know from my personal experience, I would say, looking at my COVID, people that suffer from COVID, at least, 20% from my panel.
I want to say that I saw that it's closer, and we have to think about like what is long, right? Because we've been doing this for a little over a year. But are you talking about like 3 months? Are you talking about 6 months or longer? But I want to say that over 30% will have persistent symptoms months and months later. And one thing that I tell people who don't really want to get the vaccine and have questions or just a lot of doubts about it is, my first thing is, are you a gambling man or a gambling woman? Because that's what COVID's about. Like, you could be one of the ones that's completely asymptomatic, but you could be one of the ones who was like a triathlon or, runner or just super active and end up hospitalized or become a long hauler. And so that's the thing I ask, like, if you're willing to gamble, that's up to you. But I am not willing to gamble. I'm not willing to gamble with elderly in my home. I'm not willing to gamble with young children in my home. And so that is up to each individual.
So I have a different population. I see mostly really sick patients. I see the kidney patients, the dialysis patients, and I would say that maybe 80% of them have lingering symptoms for at least 3 months.
Thank you.
And I also see we have Jose Espinosa, whose hand is raised. Jose, would you like to present your question?
Yeah, just one question. Do you guys know when the vaccine is going to be available for 16 and under?
So right now, the FDA has not approved. The one that's closest to getting the emergency approval is the Pfizer. And they are in the process of, Pfizer's in the process of finishing collecting data for that age group, the 12 to 15. And so what it looks like from what the epidemiologists, like the people who look at these numbers and studies, what they're predicting is that by the fall, so around the time that school starts for the 12 to 15 age group, they already have data for over 3,000 kids in that age group, who already got the shot, the Pfizer shot and the second shot like months ago. And so they're just collecting the data to see like how effective it is. But not the ones, but under 12 is still in the process. They're still working on dosing at this point.
Well, I'm worried 13 and up, so that's what I have.
Okay, yes. So we're hopeful. We're hopeful by August, September, right when school starts again.
Thank you.
Dr. Ye. Are there any other questions? I see no hands raised. And you could also type them in the chat box if that works better for you all. Anyone else? There's nothing else. One, I would just, a big thank you to Dr. Rosales, Dr. Cortez, Dr. Ye, just for your time, and all your expertise, your knowledge. Really, really appreciate it. Then Jean, David, thank you so much for gathering everyone and everyone just for making time. And like Supervisor Chavez said, we'll be sending out an email very shortly with a few links. One is going to be for the outreach toolkit, just so you get on a weekly basis the latest that we're pushing out in the county. One to sign up to be a CAP ambassador, and then all our social media sites, which is just easy way to just distribute information. But with that, just enjoy the rest of your Friday and have a great weekend, y'all. Take good care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Seeing you
you.
all.
Thank you.